Okay, hey, hello everybody, my name is Marcin Sordyl and I will tell you something about the narrative animations in Layers of Fear, what we have done, what we failed and what we potentially could do better. So, let's start from a short description who I am. I start from the Farm 51 over 10 years ago. Then we establish our own company and make a lot of outsource. And then I go to the Anshar Studio and I made the Layers of Fear. So probably you could think what exactly the Layers of Fear is. So there is a short description that it's divided for 6 different chapters, and 3 of them is remake of the previous part, and 3 of them it's a new content which we created from the scratch. And I will talk today about this new content, this new chapters, and it could contain a little bit spoilers, but I think that it wouldn't be bad for you if you want to play in the future. So let's start from the final node chapter and let's give some assumptions what it was. So we play as a musician who has a passion to play the piano, and she suffer because she had some accident, and after the big fire she cannot play anymore in the piano. And through the game we going through her traumas. So what was our realization of it? We damaged 3 outer fingers of her right hand, keeping the thumb and the index finger quite well working, and the left hand also wasn't damaged so much. And we pick items on the left hand to not show so much that disability hand. And we showed her limitation only a few animation. So what we could do better to make sure that player feel her suffering. So for sure we should to start from making a series of animation to test which kind of that disabilities could looks the best, and what could invoke more empathy. And for example, if we have that disabilities on the outer hands, outer fingers, sorry, it wasn't so good visible from the first person perspective, because we hide it by the more healthy fingers. And if we find out it on the beginning of the production, we could make it more consistent in the whole chapter. Another way, we have that a lot of interactions with items, and we did it by the healthy left hand, so we didn't show the player the disabilities on every time, only on that some part of narrative animation during the game. So it doesn't allow us to show them correctly. Also, we could use more contrast in the narrative in that game to show, for example, when she were before that accident and she played beautifully on the piano, and then going through her suffering that she can't play any note, and more stuff like that. Okay, let's forward to another chapter, which is a lighthouse. and it was a hub. It was some kind of construction that it connect different chapters in this place, and it was a story which just hold rest of them. So it was divided for shorter parts, and we had a lot of repetitive actions in that lighthouse chapter. For example, every of them starts from the typing on the typewriter and ends on the typing. Also, we have some telephone interactions and some calls, and in every part of that sub-chapters in the lighthouse, we have some interactions with the telephone, but every time it was on different emotions. So how we realized that? We tried to maximum reuse the interaction animation with that typewriter to, first of all, be sure that, okay, we are sure that we finish all of the animation which we need, but if maybe it's somehow repetitive, but okay, it's in the game. We can eventually made it in the final game, and we did it. And in the calling, there is some here on the video. There is some examples of interaction with that telephone, and we make that animation with showing some emotions, but in many of places that there was some somehow boring, and we just looking at the telephone and listening the dialogue without any much more interesting interactions. So what we could do better in that kind of animations. So first of all, we should think more about that animators could be the part of the design and co-create where there is animation to play, and what there is potentially around of that place to attract the player. And there is some pictures to show you what I have in my mind. Okay, so I know that there is not a beautiful picture, but there is a telephone, and it was on the level. It was on the long corridor, and we just get information that okay, dear animators, you need to put the animation here, and we just think, okay, we have a task, and we just let's figure out how make a good animation there, without just thinking that okay, maybe we should change some level to make it more interesting, more attracting, and even if we just add a chair next to that telephone, we could introduce, for example, standing from the chair, or sitting on them when the character is calmer, or when she starts to be angry, she can stand up with really fast, and we could manipulate with that position of the character. And additionally, we could add a table with some items, some props to allow our character to interact with them and make it more interesting. And even if we start talking earlier about that place where that animation should be placed, we could put the telephone to different room to give them some space to looking for more interesting things which can attract our player and looks better. Okay, I told that we have many repetitive actions in that chapter, so we have 6 different animation with interaction with the telephone, because we're talking with different people. And all of them was have some different emotion in that story, and we try to introduce that emotion, but we didn't look at from the macro level on all of that animation. We just look for a simple animation and think, okay, there should be some fear in that animation, because there is some voiceover with that, and okay, we should to fit in that emotion. But when we think more globally on that, we could, for example, use some repetitive changes. For example, when we have pick up the phone, on the beginning we have a curious character, who I don't know what is in that place, what is in that lighthouse, and the touching of the phone would be more gentle and softly. In another chapter, it'd be fast, with more angry, and holding the telephone tightly, and so on and so on. Another idea would be in that story, in some of the part of the story in the beginning, we have a younger person, and then she became 10 years older. So we also could tell about them to the player by, for example, changing the mesh, the textures of the hands, or make that animation more controlled, with more precision movement, in contrary to more fast, energetic by the younger person. I didn't know if it will work, but we could try. Okay, so let's imagine that we cannot change the place of the animation, and we need to figure out how to make interesting animation in that game. So there would be some tips how to improve that kind of animation. So we could change the distance between our camera in first-person perspective and some point of interest. It could be some prop, it could be a different character. Yeah, and generally there is one of example to from the game what it could work. Another idea is touching the surface, because in first-person perspective we didn't see the face, and in face normally as people we see the most of the emotions. So in first-person perspective we could show these emotions through the hands and the fingers and the interaction with the items. Additionally, it's more easier to set the character in the world because we don't have the presence of the body, and when we see that we touch the wall or the table on different other surfaces, we feel that we are in that space, not somewhere just in the game. Also, what could be more interesting for the player is change the pacing of the movement and let the player wait for some of the time and just looking for what will happen next. Like something happen and we wait and wait and wait, and then something happen and we see the action, and it could be much faster. And then we see that these scenes could be more interesting, less monotonic. Yeah, and so on and so on. Also, we can move something on the screen like rats, like the cockroach, like bird flying somewhere to attract our attention to look in different place, and then showing the player something there, or just like in this example, appear the another character behind us. And of course, props. Props can give us a lot of opportunities to show the emotions and what is the purpose of the character, what is their goals. For example, in this scene, we have characters who talking about the the script and how they realize that script, if they go with the script or against the script. And if we make a physical script in the scene, we could just show it physically, how they feel about that idea. And if they want to throw it out, or if they want to touch it closer. Yeah. Also, when we have a props, we could make our, as animators, make easier and hide some kind of unnecessary contact. For example, here. No. Wait. For example, here. We have writing on the script, and from technical perspective, it's not easy to make that ink fit perfectly to the paper, and it was much easier to just rotate the hand for just a little angle to hide that contact with the paper. And when we add some sounds to that, with that sound with contact with the paper, our minds feel that okay, there is a contact, we don't need to see it, and it will work in much more examples from the first person perspective, because in the direction from the camera, we didn't see directly the contact. So we could don't, for example, with hitting the other character, we don't even need to touch them, and we need to just show it somehow close to them. And then when we add some additional sound effects, the effect will work much quite good. Okay, another ideas to make that props looks better, and what it can do in the scene is adjust the grip, because naturally we still moving some of the elements in our hand, and it's not like we can constrain that props to the control of the hand, and it will work. It could looks not so nice like if we adjust the grip during the during the holding of that props. And there is also some idea to just think about the lighting, because we could use the lighting in the scene to props with a lighting to change the lighting in the scene and change the mood of the scene which we have. Okay, another some examples how to make whole of the process of making our animation is fast iterating, and probably some of them heard about the blocking, like we make some keyframes with flat interpolation to just make animation faster and just check the posing and timing of that animation. But in first person perspective, it works slightly different, because we have camera in our character, and when we try block also the camera with that flat interpolation, it doesn't work so well, because the clarity are lower. So it's really nice to mix it and make some blockout with the hands, but make the camera smooth to show it in more clear way. And this is writing is really crucial to talk with different departments, because we could make it really fast, and then when we talk with them, we could give a feedback that, okay, this is something really out of our idea. Another example is some cuts, because we don't need to show everything in that first person, because the player don't really like see the character who just walking through the corridor, just walking for long distances, because they could think, why I cannot play and I can walk in the scene, why there is the animation. So we could make some ideas what to do to not just walk through some corridor or for some longer distance, but we also could implement some cuts to that scene, and it's important to make it on some movement to make it feel keep in motion, not just cutting it in some random place. Also, when we're iterating our scenes, our cutscenes, we could think that what we could make just by audio, without animated additionally, because it can make our process faster, and also if we can generate our voiceover by AI to feel that pacing of the scene, even if we don't have the final voiceovers. And it could be helpful because sometimes the writing on the paper doesn't fit with the voiceover when we just realize it on the scene, and then we can easily reiterate it on some generated voiceover. And here is the example with that voiceovers generated by AI and the final one.
It is what he wanted.
Yes.
All his obsessions, all this madness, all your stupid ideas.
We don't have to do this.
And I helped you. Oh, God, I helped you. You know what? You're right. We don't have to do this. It is what he wanted.
Yes.
All right. So there was some quick tips how we can improve how our animation looks. But what about the start the animation and match them with the gameplay? So we could start the animation by interaction, and it feels much more natural in most cases because the player interact and they activate that animation, so they just want to see the effect. But there is important where there's a place to that interact. For example, in this example, we have some, or maybe I hold it here. Okay, here we have some body with, and we have interaction with them. And on the beginning, there was one direction to approach of that interaction, to start it always from that right side, and don't have some wide angle to interaction. But then after some playtest, the designers just figure out that it would be better to just make more space to walk around of that place. So then we could approach to that character from different direction, and it was better from the gameplay perspective, but we lose that smooth transition in that interaction and with the start with the animation. And in the other hand, we have when we have some small space like a desk and a chair, we have really narrow angle of that possibility approach to interaction, and it blends to animation much better. Okay, another important thing to know is keep the pace of animation. And in this example, we have a fire. We just running escape from that fire, and we need to just start the animation and feel that it works really fast. But we had some interaction here, and when the player are not cautious enough, they can miss that point of interaction and just lose that immersion of that game and the spacing. But there is some places where we could start animation on the trigger without any interaction, and it is important to cut it on some grid movement. For example, here we're just walking, and suddenly the chain attacked us, and it feels more natural because it's not like we're just walking and then we have a cut and we have some animation when we're still walking, for example, but or running, or it wasn't even with a change of the pace. Okay, let's go to the DLC, which we create after we made the main game, so we could learn a little bit about how we can make all of the process of making the not only the animation, but just generally that kind of game. So our assumption that was we have a story about directing movies, so we have a new gameplay mechanic according to them, and it was really animation heavy because we have a lot of scenes to record, and we have a short period of time for the creation of it because we have core production of it for 4 months. So how was our realization? We find out that when we are so divided and we don't talk too much between the departments. As I show you some, as I showed you some example from that lighthouse and from that telephone that we didn't think about to talk and change the design. So we decide to make more interdisciplinary strike teams to design some part of the game, and we put the animation, design, graphic people, and because of that we have that really small teams, we start to talk a lot among us and brainstorm really a lot, and we find out that possibility places of some of the disagree on the really early stage. So I just show you how it goes.
Rolling. Sound. Action. You changed the script. You said you would just finish it. You wanted this movie to be a warning.
We need shock, blood, gore. Something people will remember for years. It's shocking, it's grotesque. The form swallows up the essence.
Destruction is part of life. Accept it. Don't you want to be great?
So, because of that more flat structure and better communication, we could, I think, make a game better with most of the areas. But still, there was some potential solutions what we could do better in the future. So, for example, we could set the guidelines of that animation, how it could we'll see what kind of the stylization of that animation could be. We could implement more. We could implement better better feedback process because we talk a lot between different departments about them. What the animation we should place it, how it could looks like, but then we didn't feedback each other among the animators good enough to make that animation even better. And we could record actors faster because according to that really short process of that production, which it was 4 months, we, for example, need to even polish the animation on the stage where we have only voiceover, only AI-generated voiceover. So then actors just try to fit with their voices to that existing cutscenes, and we didn't have a space to fix it after they record that final voiceovers. So let's summarize that. So let's, on the beginning of the making a game, let's test your assumptions and motions, to not just go to that making that animation without the clear guidelines. And what could be helpful for that? You can include some external videos examples and find an examples what is too much, what is too less, and what hit the point with kind of with some of the stylization of your animation and add some information what you should pay attention in that kind of the videos, and it could make your all the animation team or just the team in the same page. Also, remember about the touching the surfaces, the props, attract attention with different movement, and look at that at all of your animations as a whole, and how you can use the contrast between them in different parts of the game, and the repetition as a narrative enhancers. And what is, I think, that most important, treat the animation as a part of the design, not just an asset which we put on some place where the design point and what the writers say that they should be. If the animators are in the early stage of that design phase, it could make much better experience, not just an animation. So it's almost all, but last but not least, we try to make a Discord call to keep all of the animators together, and where we could talk with each other and share the knowledge. So if you want to join, just scan the QR code, and that's all for me. Thank you.